first and foremost, we got to give a shout out to Z Squirrel. This Z Squirrel account finds everything, I swear, on X. And they found something that gave people a reason to pause. They found out that apparently Bernie Sanders voted alongside Lindsey Graham to continue the genocide in Gaza. No, I'm not joking. I would not joke about something like that. I didn't even know about this had it not been for Z Squirrel. And there are a number of people that are venting about this here. Again, Z Squirrel is on it. Bernie Sanders just supported a resolution introduced by fanatical Zionist neocon Lindsey Graham and co-sponsored by fellow fanatical neocon Zionists Tom Cotton and John Fetterman, opposing a permanent ceasefire and to ensure Gaza genocide will continue by vowing that Hamas is not allowed to have control over Gaza. This is the propaganda the Israeli death cult and Zionists use to launder genocide, as eliminating Hamas means continuing the genocide until completion of Hamas is a mass social movement with deep and firm roots in Gazan society and the de facto government that can never be destroyed militarily except through genocide. So I'll show you something here really quickly, what Z Squirrel is referring to. There's this statement here from Lindsey Graham. Very pleased and proud the U.S. Senate unanimously adopted my resolution stating that Hamas, a brutal terrorist organization, cannot be allowed to have political or military control over Gaza. Tonight, the Senate spoke with moral clarity on one of the most important issues of our time. Barbaric terrorist organizations like Hamas are not legitimate and should never wield political or military power. So I just want to show you like who's applauding this. American Jewish Committee applauded it. We commend the Senate for unanimously praising a resolution reaffirming that Hamas must not be allowed to continue controlling Gaza. With bipartisan support, Graham pushes the resolution to boot Hamas from Gaza. So what people have to understand is that this particular bill, this basically gave Israel the green light, along with Donald Trump, gave Israel the green light to continue the genocide in Gaza. Because what they are trying to do, what neocons like Lindsey Graham is trying to do, is that they're trying to use the excuse of we have to eliminate Hamas. So in order to eliminate Hamas, you cannot have a permanent ceasefire. Now, some of you may be wondering, but Bernie Sanders, he supported a ceasefire. Did he support a permanent ceasefire? I don't think so. In fact, if we go back, you'll see this here. His interview with Dana Bash, that was not what he said. Listen to this, just to recap.
I want to just clarify one thing, Senator, if I might. You support a humanitarian pause in Gaza. Some of your fellow progressives say that there should be a full-on ceasefire, which would require an agreement on both sides to halt the fighting. Do you support a ceasefire? And if not, why not?
Well, I don't know how you can have a ceasefire, permanent ceasefire, with an organization like Hamas.
Pause. So does everybody see what they're doing? Right now, we expect this from Lindsey Graham. He's a neocon. He's a psycho war mongering like maniac. We expect that from him. However, Bernie Sanders is not supposed to be like the left version of Lindsey Graham. Both of them are using this same rhetoric. So that was Bernie Sanders telling you back then, we can't have a permanent ceasefire because Hamas. So as long as they can use the excuse of Hamas, Israel can continue to kill civilians in Gaza. And that's mainly who they've been killing. They're not really killing Hamas. So think about that for a second. You have Bernie Sanders, and a number of people roasted him on this, by the way, even people I didn't expect to. Bernie Sanders voting along with Lindsey Graham for war. I'll let it continue.
which is dedicated to turmoil and chaos and destroying the state of Israel. And I think what the Arab countries in the region understand, that Hamas has got to go.
Is Israel destroyed? No, it's not. What has been destroyed? Gaza, right? Israel also has the Iron Dome. Gaza doesn't have an Iron Dome. Bernie Sanders, and I was talking to, family about this. Bernie has not been good on this issue. And actually, it was said to me today that he was never good on this issue. So something to keep in mind, that while he's telling you Israel cannot block aid, the aid has to come into Gaza, when it comes time to vote, he's voting for legislation that is basically still giving Israel the okay to continue to bomb Gaza because Hamas is there, which means you're giving them the green light to continue to kill kids in Gaza.
So
my innards writhe at the despicable thing you said in the interview today, whether it was moral idiocy, whether it was exemplary of being a moral monster, or whether it was cynical opportunism, because you're too much of a coward to break ranks with President Biden. I don't know which it is. When you oppose a ceasefire at this point, you are in effect and in fact, you are in effect and in fact giving Israel carte blanche to continue to indiscriminately target the civilian infrastructure and the civilian population of Gaza, 1 million of whom, or 1,100,000 of whom, are children. You have become a moral monster.
Yeah. I mean, Norm is right. That's exactly what Bernie is doing. Like I said, you expect it from Lindsey Graham. You expect it from Tom Cotton. You expect it from John Fetterman, who, if some people would have listened to me a couple years ago when John Fetterman was running, I warned you how John Fetterman was about Israel and that he was against BDS. I warned you who he really was. And now more people are starting to see, and they're like, oh my God, this guy is horrible. Yeah, but a lot of pundits out here tried to tell you that John Fetterman was progressive, even though he said so himself in multiple interviews that he wasn't. So you got to keep it real, folks. Norm is 100% correct about that. And then there's this. I think we got to go back to him refusing to call it a genocide. This is another one that I think that some people have also slept on. Again, Z Squirrel is on it. Not only does Bernie Sanders refuse to acknowledge the genocide of Palestinians, as every major human rights organization in the world does, goes on to say that by itself makes Bernie Sanders a scumbag piece of, I'm not going to say this, see you next Tuesday. I hate that word, but you guys can read it. But he always gets enraged when you ask him about it. You can ask him about anything from the right. He doesn't care. He remains calm, collected. But ask him any question that exposes his depravity on Palestine, and he goes insane with rage. And you will see that here. Here's another example.
I mean, you faced quite a lot of criticism recently.
I face criticism every day, no matter what you do, and that's my line of work, and I accept it.
Yeah, some barracking over this word, over the whole word about
people
genocide.
People are talking about what constitutes genocide, all that stuff. Fine. Frankly, what we should be talking about is how we stop this damn war. Do you have an International Court of Justice which is defining what genocide means?
That's Bernie Sanders not wanting to agree that it's a genocide. That's Bernie Sanders getting flustered because he's asked about it. And there's Bernie Sanders telling you we need to stop this war, yet he voted along with Lindsey Graham not to stop the war. Does everybody see now how he plays both sides, how he continues not to be targeted by AIPAC? By the way, AIPAC has been applauding the fact that Bernie voted along on this. So I'm trying to tell you, he playing both sides. That's why AIPAC ain't going after Bernie Sanders, because Bernie is not calling for a permanent ceasefire. Bernie is also saying, oh, we should get the aid in, but he's not calling for no ceasefire. And he's also not calling it a genocide. So he's treading that line. Fast forward to AOC making the webinar and conflating anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. Remember that? Walking that line. That's why they're not targeted. That's why AIPAC didn't go after AOC and try to primary her. That's why they didn't go after Bernie Sanders and try to primary him. We have to be very careful here, folks. There are people walking around and they are wolves in sheep's clothing. They're pretending that they're on the side of the righteous, but they're actually also tiptoeing on the side of the oppressor, because they're trying to maintain their whole political career and their book deals and their speaking engagements and the money that they can make from that. That's a big reality. People got to understand. This goes beyond just sitting in Congress, God damn it. And they make a hell of a lot more than any of you will ever make their first year being a congressperson. It also includes book deals, tours, speaking engagements. There's so much that comes along with this. A lot of these people have sat there and they become very rich. That's how a Nancy Pelosi can have a freezer full of ice cream. But some of you can't afford to buy a pint. That's how. So notice how flustered he gets when the word genocide is mentioned.
We can agree on, I certainly see, is a mass slaughter of women and children, which is unacceptable, which has got to end. And as a United States Senator, I am leading the effort in the Congress to make sure that Netanyahu doesn't get the money he needs to continue that effort. People think that's not good enough, or they want to argue about this word or that word. Fine, go do it. That's where the left is usually.
I mean, mass slaughter of people is a very strong way to express
well, that's
it.
what I think.
That's, absolutely. And yet, as you say, there is this argument about genocide. Is the difference between mass slaughter and genocide?
You tell me.
Numbers?
All right, talk about genocides. If I ask you historically about genocides, what would you say?
Well, I mean, Rwanda, Cambodia, the Holocaust, the Second World War.
Right.
So those are vastly bigger numbers.
That's right.
Than what we're talking about now.
Gaza's a smaller country. But why are we? That's what I would think when you talk about genocide, right?
I mean, you said you were uncomfortable with the word genocide.
Precisely because what I don't want to see is that word become something, 8 people like genocide. All right. It is a horrible. What more do you have to say?
Ladies and gentlemen, Bernie Sanders really exposed himself on this issue. And not all of us may have arrived at the same time. I think a lot of people woke up and learned more about it after October 7th, and that's fine. To quote friend of the show, Roger Meadows, people aren't always going to move when you want them to, but eventually, if they get there, applaud them for getting there. But from what I've seen, Bernie has always been bad on this issue. There was also the video of the 2015 town hall when he was questioned about the occupation from an audience member, and Bernie Sanders shouted them down and told them to be quiet. Now, if I had seen that video prior to Bernie's campaigns, I wouldn't have donated money to Bernie Sanders. I didn't see that video until last year. So this vote with Lindsey Graham, that's not okay. Now he out here doing this tour against the oligarchy and all that jazz and stuff like that. But Bernie Sanders needs to answer why he voted the way that he did, along with a bunch of neocons. He used to be a strong voice for the anti-war movement, But Bernie's been voting along with these wars, man. Ashura said, demand your money back, Sabrina. I wish there was a way we could get our money back. I don't know. Maybe there needs to be some type of clause for that if you donate money to a politician and they don't, do what they said that they were going to do, and they move like in a different way, that we could get our money back. I don't know. Maybe that needs to be a clause. But you can even see with Bernie Sanders here, again, all lies will be exposed. You see, while he's out there doing that oligarchy tour, and that's getting a lot of press attention, this vote that he did not get a lot of press attention. So this is why we have independent media. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.